Nigeria is set to hold its presidential election in a few hours' time. The election was initially scheduled for 16th February, but INEC postponed it to 23rd February, citing logistical and operational challenges. Ahead of tomorrow's vote, I had a sit-down with Barrister Festus Okoye, the National Commissioner and Chairman of Information and Voter Education at INEC. Here is what he had to say. Thank you so much, Honorable Commissioner, for giving us this interview. Getting straight to it. INEC postponed the election from the 16th to the 23rd of February, citing logistical and operational challenges. But how prepared is the Commission to hold tomorrow's vote?
Well, we are ready to proceed with this particular election. And to show that we are ready, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, rolled out a timeline for some of the unconcluded activities leading up to this election. All the materials, both sensitive and non-sensitive materials, required for the conduct of these elections are already with the local government offices of the Independent National Electoral Commission. In Nigeria, we have 774 local governments. So all these materials have gone to those local governments. The procedure is that all the materials for the conduct of the elections are deposited with the Central Bank of Nigeria in all the states of the Federation. And before these materials are moved out, the representatives of the political parties are invited to come for inspection. The media are invited. Domestic and international observers are invited. So as at yesterday, all the materials required for the conduct of these elections have left the Central Bank, with the exception of one state, and that is Bayelsa State. They said they are going to move directly from the Central Bank to the registration areas. As at 9 o'clock this morning, being Friday, we have activated the registration area centers. These are centers where we are going to keep all the ad hoc staff that will conduct the elections tomorrow. And for the purposes of this election, we have almost 1 million ad hoc staff scattered in all the states of the Federation. So by 9 o'clock this morning, we activated all the registration area centers. And by 12 noon, we will begin refresher course for all these ad hoc staff. And as of now, the supervisory presiding officers are collecting their materials from the local government offices of the Commission, and they will go to the registration area centers with these materials, where they will be finally distributed. And then by 7 a.m. tomorrow, all the presiding officers and the assistant presiding officers and the security agents will be at the polling unit.
Thank you for that. So would you please take us through the voting process in the Nigerian presidential elections?
Well, the voting process in Nigeria is really easy. One, the presiding officers and the assistant presiding officers are going to be given what we call the smart card readers. For the purposes of this election, the Independent National Electoral Commission is deploying over 190,000 smart card readers. Now, before this election, the Independent National Electoral Commission registered 84,004,084 voters. They are the ones who are going to be voting in this election. We also issue them with what we call permanent voters cards. As at yesterday, over 72 million of these 84 million registered voters have collected their permanent voters cards. These are the people who are expected at the polling units on Saturday, the 23rd. When the voter gets to the polling unit, the first thing that needs to be done is for one of the assistant presiding officers to confirm that the voter is in the right polling unit. So the voter hands over his or her permanent voter's card to one of the assistant presiding officers. There are 3 assistant presiding officers who confirms that the voter is in the right polling unit. If the voter is not in the right polling unit, the voter is advised to go to the right polling unit. If the voter is in the right polling unit, the permanent voter's card of the voter is slotted into the smart card reader for purposes of confirmation. The smart card reader does verification and authentication. It confirms that the holder of the card which the voter has brought to the polling unit is a card issued by the Independent National Electoral Commission. If it's a card issued by the Independent National Electoral Commission, that card will still be verified with the voters register to confirm that the name of the voter and all the information in the permanent voters card corresponds with the information we have in the voters register. If the information corresponds, then the voter will be asked to, the smart card reader has to read the biometrics of the voter. If the smart card reader reads the biometrics of the voter correctly, then the voter will be given a ballot paper, and the voter will now go into a secluded place, into the cubicle, to go and cast his or her vote. If perchance the smart card reader is unable to read the biometrics of the voter, then we will still allow the voter to vote, so long as the information on the permanent voter's card corresponds with the information on the voter's register, and the picture of the voter on the voter's register corresponds with the picture of the voter on the permanent voter's card. But having given the voter his or her ballot paper, we will still ask the voter to put his or her thumbprint beside his or her picture on the voter's register and drop a phone number for purposes of forensic audit. So this basically is the procedure. If a voter gets to the polling unit and the smart card reader is unable to read the card, the voter will not be allowed to vote. So that's exactly the procedure that will be adopted for the purposes of this election.
Thank you.
Yes.
And as at last week,
yes,
there were more than 84 million people that were registered to participate in this election.
Yes.
What is the new figure heading into tomorrow's election?
The new figure heading into this election is 72 million because after we have vested all the PVCs that have been collected from the various local governments, we found out that over 11 million Nigerians have not collected their permanent voters' cards. So those 11 million are not expected to be at the polling units because all the collected permanent voters' cards have been deposited with the Central Bank of Nigeria in all the states of the Federation.
More than 70 million Nigerians are registered to participate in the presidential election. The election itself has attracted 73 candidates. But how big a challenge will this pose for the Commission?
Well, it's a big challenge managing a polling unit with 73 party agents. Managing a polling unit with domestic election observers, managing a polling unit with international observers, and managing a polling unit with different varieties of media organizations. So it's a huge challenge. And then it's also a huge challenge for the result sheet, because the law expects us to give each party agent a copy of the result sheet. And when you are writing the results, there's a limit to which the carbon can take. So the implication is that we have to rewrite the results on more than 10 occasions in order for each party agent to get a copy. So it's a huge challenge. But we don't want to keep the Nigerian people waiting for too long. We have 8,809 registration areas, and these registration areas are going to serve as collation centers for the presidential election results and National Assembly election results. So what we have done is to appoint 2 collation officers for the 8,809 registration areas, and also 2 collation officers for the 774 local government areas in Nigeria. One of the collation officers will collate the presidential election results alone, while the other one will collate the National Assembly election results. The purpose is to speed up collation and to make sure that we don't keep the nation waiting for too long, since eventually the presidential election results will be brought to the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, to the National Collation Center, where the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, who is the chief electoral officer of the Federation, and the returning officer for the presidential election will announce the result, while the election to the Senate and to the House of Representatives will terminate at some point at the state level. So the returns will be made at the state level, while the return for the presidential declaration and return for the presidential elections will be made at the National Collation Center at the International Conference Center in Abuja.
Going into tomorrow's election, what are some of the security measures that INEC has taken to ensure the safety of the voters, the safety of the candidates, and the safety of everyone who's going to participate in the election?
Well, you know, the conduct of election is a multi-stakeholder venture. So other stakeholders are also participating in this election. The political parties are there, the various security agencies are there, civil society groups and organizations, the media, and the other critical stakeholders are all in this particular process. The Nigerian police force is the lead agency in terms of election security, and they have promised that they are going to provide both inner cordon security and outer cordon security and even perimeter security for the purposes of this particular election. So they are also going to protect critical national infrastructure and also all the places where election materials are going to be. So they are providing security at the INEC offices in the various states. They are providing security at the INEC local government offices where these materials have been taken to. They're also providing security at the various registration area centers where the ad hoc staff that will conduct these elections will be. And then at each polling unit, we are also going to have unarmed members of the various security agencies, the police, the customs, the immigration, the civil defense, the road safety, and so on, at the polling units. And then at the outer cordon, we are going to have armed security people, at least to give protection both to the voters, election personnel, election materials, and the rest of them.
Considering the postponement of the election from the 16th to the 23rd of February, do you think this will affect the voter turnout in tomorrow's election?
We really don't expect the disappointment of the past to affect the voter turnout in this particular election. Because what the Nigerian people have done is to turn their disappointment into determination. They are more than ever before determined to go and exercise their democratic franchise. The Nigerian people, most of them were very angry at the postponement or the rescheduling, but in the last 2 days, they have now been speaking with a lot of determination and a lot of hope that there's a possibility that the disappointment was a blessing in disguise and that the commission has been given a second chance and that we should deliver on this second chance. So we believe that voter turnout will still be very, very high, but I must acknowledge that definitely the rescheduling will affect voter turnout, but it will not affect voter turnout in any significant manner because the Nigerian people are fired up. They want to exercise their democratic franchise. They are engaged with this electoral process. They believe that democracy is the best for them, and they want to make it work.
Thank you. And while postponing that election, INEC said it was doing so because of logistical and operational challenges.
Yes.
Are there particular points that you might want to point out?
In terms of the logistical and operational challenges we had? Well, you know, the sheer volume of ballot papers we had to print. We had to print over 427.7 million ballot papers. And some of these, the bulk of these ballot papers were printed outside the country. There were issues of timelines in terms of the coming in of these ballot papers. We also had the challenges relating to the weather in moving some of these materials to the various states. And we had challenging also in relation to some of the vehicles conveying some of these materials breaking down on the road. So a combination of all these things created a huge problem for us. The critical thing was that because we had an INEC office burned down in Isi Alangwa in Abia State, then almost a week later, another INEC office was burned down in Kwampa in Plateau State. And as we were trying to recover from that, the entire almost 4,695 smart card readers were burned down in our office in Oka in Anambra State. So these things diverted our attention. So we removed our eyes from the ball in relation to taking care of the logistic issues involved in trucking in these tons and tons of paper and dumping them in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja. So these were the challenges we had. Weather came in, compounded the problem, and we just had no choice than to reschedule the election.
And finally, sir, when can Nigeria and the world expect the result of this election?
Honestly, I cannot, with every sense of responsibility and sincerity, tell you when Nigerians will expect the result. But we have put in enough safeguards to make sure that the Nigerian people do not wait for too long before they know who their next president will be and before they know who the members of the National Assembly will be. That is the reason why we decided to put in 2 collation officers per registration area and 2 collation officers in all the local governments to speed up the collation process. So the moment the results come in from any of the states, we will simply announce the results and then wait for other results to come in. And these results are coming from different parts of the country. Nigeria is a country of huge diversity. There are some polling units that are in places that are almost inaccessible. There are polling units that are in riverine areas. And there are polling units that are in hilly areas and in very dangerous places. So these results have to be harvested at the state level before they are brought in here. So we expect quick turnaround, but we cannot put a finger on the exact date we will announce the results of the presidential elections.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.